So in our previous video, we introduced the Project Explorer application in MicroStation. And under the Civil Standards tab, we mentioned how that it'll show us both all of the civil preferences and standards that we have in our current design file, as well as all the civil preferences and standards that we have in DGN Libraries. And that's what we want to talk about here, is the DGN Libraries, how to access them, and how to set them up. Now this is important, obviously, because as a agency or as a company, we want to be able to set up and manage these preferences in a centralized location, in this case a DGN library, and then propagate these standards and preferences across our organization. So you can see here under Civil Standards that I can set up standards for civil sales, horizontal vertical design standards, my features, filters, project settings, and roundabouts. Now each of these, as far as how to create civil sales, how to create design standards, how to create feature definitions, those are all going to be covered in detail in other videos. We just want to talk about now how, once we've put those in DGN libraries, how to make them accessible to all of our users. Now the first thing to point out here, of course, is the MSDGN Liveliest variable. So you can see here I've done something very simple. I've created some DGN libraries. I've put them in a C:(test) directory, and I've pointed to them with the MSDGN Liveliest variable. So these are standard MicroStation DGN libraries. There's nothing special about them with regard to civil. You can just put them in some centralized location, point to them, and you're good to go. Now you'll notice, for example, as I come down here to my civil sales, I've got a DGN Live containing a civil sale. If I right click on that and go to properties, notice that a user, let me just resize this here, a user can come in and see the properties, but everything's ghosted out, so they can't make any changes. For example, if I come down here to design standards, let's say I go to a 50-mile-an-hour horizontal design standards, I can go to properties. Notice I can, as a user, I can see all of the design values, how everything is calculated, but I can't make any changes because, again, they're safely stored off in a DGN library. Okay. Same thing with my feature definitions here. You know, I've got all my different feature definitions here. Again, these are stored off in a DGN library, so I have access to them, but again, I can't make any specific changes to those. Now, one thing I do want to point out, and I've kind of made a couple of mistakes here on purpose to show you one thing you need to be aware of. You'll notice here I've got a civil sales DGN library that contains a civil sale. And you'll notice I go down into design standards and I've got a design standards library. But notice when I get to feature definition that the civil sale shows up under features and the design standard shows up under features. For example, if I come down to project settings, you'll notice that both of those show up under project settings. Now, this is something you'll need to be aware of why this happens. What happens is there's nothing specific about a DGN library, a name or anything like that, that tells it where to go. So what the program does, it looks inside the DGN library, and if it finds a civil sale there, it's going to list it under civil sales. It looks inside the DGN library. If it finds a design standard there, it's going to list it under design standards. In our case, it looked inside the civil sales, and it looked inside design stages, and it found features there. So if I was, for example, under civil sales, you'll notice it didn't find very many, but I did have some features somehow or another in this civil sales. Therefore, it shows up maybe where it shouldn't. So just be aware of that. So for example, if I come over here and we'll do a file open, and we'll change our thing here to DGN Libraries. Let's open up my civil sales here. So now I'm actually in the civil sale DGN library, but you'll notice if I look here, there's feature definitions here. If I come down to project settings, somebody's created a project setting. So I want to be sure, I want to clean these up and make sure there's no settings or preferences or standards for other things, because if there are, they may show up in locations where you don't really want them to.